Hey y'all, welcome back to the Overflow Podcast, where we're all about living the overflow of God's presence and power in our everyday lives. I'm Eli Austin, and as you can tell, I'm flying solo today. Pastor Wayne's not feeling well, so let's send some healing prayers his way. But today, we're talking about a side of Christmas that often gets overlooked. We love the peaceful imagery, the lights, the songs, and the traditions, but the truth is, the night Jesus was born was anything but calm. It was chaotic, uncertain, painful, and vulnerable. And that's exactly where God chose to enter the world. This episode is about rediscovering the vulnerability of Christmas. Jesus didn't arrive with force or control. He came as a baby, trusting humanity, stepping into our mess, and inviting us into a relationship rather than submission. As you listen today, I want you to consider this question. What if God is not waiting for your chaos to settle before he meets you? Man, how powerful was it on Sunday with Pastor Wayne? I thought he did just such an incredible job. I know that he and Pastor Jerry often mention that, you know, Christmas and Easter are two of the most difficult times to preach about because most of us have heard about those stories quite often. So I felt that Pastor Wayne just did an incredible job of really breaking down what was actually happening on Christmas, and taking us sort of through a journey of why did those elements happen. And I still think it's important that we embrace the Christmas season. It's joyful, but really Jesus didn't come and it was not a silent night. The reality of Jesus's birth is there was pain, there was confusion, there was fear, there was uncertainty. But I really think that parallels with our lives, right? The nativity and where they were at in the stable. They weren't in an inn. They were uncertain on their travels. Joseph and Mary, you're going through birth. Birth is not a quiet experience. I don't know that for myself. We're trying to start our own family here, but I can remember that, from my parents and from my friends sharing, birth is not a quiet experience. There is pain. And yes, it's extremely joyful about what is happening, humans being brought into the world. But I think if we really truly understand and we wrap our hands around the first Christmas, it was not a silent night. And those parallels are so strong because it is a reflection of our own lives, right? Our lives aren't always quiet. It's rather chaotic, particularly nowadays. So if you take a step back and you really analyze that first night, I think it's incredible how tied it is, and it really drives how Jesus understands our lives, the pain that we go through. I mean, he was unbelievably vulnerable, and rather than coming with power, which we know he will one day, he came vulnerable, and he came to the creation that God made, which was humanity. And I just find that so incredible that Christ, he became dependent on us. So we, in turn, we must learn to depend on God as well and on one another. And that is so incredibly impactful when you really step back and think about Jesus coming as a baby. We were joking on Sunday, and every time we say baby Jesus, I think about Ricky Bobby. But truly, when you think about baby Jesus, it's a baby, and he needed to be rely on us for food, for shelter, for protection. And that was really what Mary and Joseph were. They were his parents, right? And just as a child looks up to their parents, he was looking up to his parents. And that's something that oftentimes, I think that vulnerability piece is something that we really overlook. Vulnerability is actually, in that moment, was shown as a strength, maybe not a weakness. It was God's way of sort of redefining power, if you will. He needed to depend on humanity for protection, for care, for survival. But the manger also really redefines power. It's God's power is shown through humility. It's shown through restraint. It's thrown through surrender, not dominance. And that really, it landed so distinctly for me because, again, we get into the Christmas season, and that's sort of the one thing that we always think about is the manger and baby Jesus, and the song Silent Night. And I like that to me, that's what it was growing up. But now the way that Pastor Wayne broke it down for us on Sunday was just, I loved it. I really did, because it almost flips it on its head of how we believed it happened and how we talk about it. But man, it's God entered humanity, not comfort. He didn't come as a king on a throne. He came as a baby. And that, again, it just goes back to, how many times I have had friends or, peers ask, how does he understand my pain? Because he lived through it. He went through the pain and the suffering and the uncertainty as a child. And for Mary and Joseph to really see and get a feeling for what we go through. He knows what kind of pain that we have as humans, because he was one. And I just think once you actually wrap your hands around that, man, how incredible the relationship with him, because he's been there, he's done that, he's went through it, he gets it. So you can depend on him, you can lean into him, and he will always be there in those moments. And I think it also goes and it shows that that's why we are here as a group. It's not a solo mission, right? God, he leaned into, the protection that Jesus really needed to have from his parents, from Mary and Joseph. And there's that dependency piece. And yes, we need to be dependent on him, but also to be dependent on one another, right? I'm in a text group, and we've been talking a lot about like accountability partners, right? You need to have an accountability partner. Is that so powerful? You're not doing this thing we call life solo. It's important to have someone there that you can be dependent on, that you can feel confident in, and going and sharing where you might be, but never forgetting that Jesus is there with you, because he went through the same thing. And that vulnerable piece, it's kind of interesting, the foreshadowing. There's a vulnerability that's the strength, right, that I just talked about. But when you go through and you talk about, from the manger, almost to the cross, right? And Pastor Wayne made these sort of connections. It was almost full circle, where there was some foreshadowing going on with, Christmas is the sort of the first step to Calvary. He was, wrapped in swaddling clothes. And then when he died, he was wrapped again, like that piece of, he came in a manger that was, a trough at a stable, and he went to a tomb at the end that necessarily wasn't his. So like there's so much connectivity between the beginning and the end, and there's the foreshadowing. But really, this is where we can understand and really grab a hold that Jesus understands our pain because he lived through it. There's that sort of, there's the connection, right? That we always ask, do I believe that Jesus truly understands my struggle? Yes, he does. And I think oftentimes we're afraid to invite him in to the pain that we have, because we feel like he doesn't quite know what we're going through. And I hear that so much, and we hear it so much today, as connected as we are with these devices. We are in a world where there's a lot of folks that feel alone. We're more connected than we ever were, yet we are probably more alone than we ever were up here. But in our hearts, Jesus is with us every step of the way. So we need to open up and invite him into our lives. And I think it's, once again, you go back to the Christmas story, it's much easier for you to invite him in and understand that he knows our pain because he went through it. And there's that sort of the connection between, birth and then eventually sacrifice on the cross. Like he went through pain in the beginning and the uncertainty to sacrifice at the end. And gosh, it's imagining doing that as an individual, knowing that that was going to be his journey here on earth. I mean, I don't know. I say it all the time. I wouldn't want to be president. I also don't think that I would want to go through that if I knew that was going to be the end. Yet that's what God chose to do, was to bring him in as a baby, to let him grow through life, become a teenager, become, child, become a teenager, and eventually a young adult and a young man, and to lead his discipleship. But at each stage of life, there's connectivity. There's connectivity to, he understands it as a baby. He understands it as a, as a child, and as a teenager, and as a young adult, and as an adult. And, that he gets every stage of life because he went through it as well. And gosh, I mean, that is just something that is, I never really had an opportunity to think about it like that. And what Pastor Wayne did for us on Sunday, I just felt was such a gift, because it really reframed for me what Christmas is. And I know that there's the age old saying of the reason for the season, and don't take Christ out of Christmas. And absolutely, we need to remember that. But being able to really reframe it around, what did this mean? Jesus gave us the greatest gift ever. And he was also the greatest gift on Christmas. He's, I even was thinking about it before I hopped on here. It's almost like when people, they haven't found him yet. It's like the present that you've left underneath the tree. You haven't opened it. It's there. He's there. The present is there for you. It's just waiting to be opened and embraced. That relationship with Christ is waiting to be opened and embraced. And when we can really connect to him, connect to the story of Christmas, the true story, it makes it much easier to choose Jesus on a daily basis. He came vulnerable so we could choose him freely. This wasn't something that, he pushed and he made. This is a choice for us. When he came vulnerable, it was a choice for us. And I think we have to lean into our faith. It's the nature of the beast. We want to have control over every single thing that we do. I know I feel that way. I want to control over my business. I want control over my life. I want control over, how much money I'm going to make, and control over my health, and control over X, Y, Z, you name it. But really, it's about having faith that we can trust God beyond Christmas. And there's another thing that Pastor Wayne talked about on make Christmas every day. And yeah, there's maybe not the trees and the lights and all of that, but once you get past the 25th, and Pastor Wayne said this last Sunday, from the 26th of December to the following 24th of December, are you remembering the Christmas story? Can you make Christmas every day? Because if you remember the true story of how he came, it makes it much easier to trust God every single day. You have the faith that he's going to be there, because he is, one, and because, number two, he went through what we went through. So what would it look like? He asked us on Sunday, and I ask it again here. What would it look like if we were to live every day like it was Christmas? Opening up that gift of relationship with Jesus every single day and embracing it. And quit clinging on to control and start clinging on to your faith. Because let's be real, it's not meant to be easy. Life is not easy, nor will it ever be. But when you can cling on to him, man, it is just so incredibly powerful. I just, as I look ahead to, tomorrow being Christmas Eve and Thursday being Christmas, it's really an invitation to surrender. It's an invitation for vulnerability, and it's an invitation for trust. And remembering that as we go through the season. And yes, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be joyful about the presents and the break from all the craziness, and getting to spend, quality time with your family and friends, and the incredible food, and the incredible, the smells, the Christmas tree, the presents, all of that. It's, yes, embrace all of it, but don't let it take away from the true reason for the season. And don't let that distract you from the true story of Christmas. And understanding that Christmas was not a silent night. God entered humanity, not comfort. And Jesus chose vulnerability. This whole story, when you can take a look at that, the manger, it redefines power. It points to the cross. There's that connectivity between the beginning and the end. he understands our pain because he came as a baby, as a human. And it's building on that trust isn't weakness, right? Again, go back to where God trusted humanity with his own son, revealing that love goes beyond comprehension, right? His love goes beyond what we can understand. We were God's creation, yet we were bent and twisted, and God still trusted that humanity would protect his son. Oh, that in itself is incredible. And this is a choice for us. Christmas season is a choice. It's not a forced submission. It's a choice, and it's an invited relationship. And once we understand that we're called to be vulnerable, we're called to be dependent on Christ, we're called to be dependent on one another, it really makes this season so much more impactful for me. And hopefully it makes it more impactful for you all as well. And I think it's just such a powerful reminder that, Christmas isn't about escaping the chaos. It's about discovering that God is willing to step right into it with us. Again, Jesus didn't come to control us. He came vulnerable so we could choose him. He understands pain. He understands fear. He understands uncertainty and weakness because he lived it. And that same Jesus still meets us in the middle of our lives today. So as you move through this Christmas week, here's a little bit of encouragement. Stop waiting for things to calm down before trusting God. Invite him into the chaos, invite him into the mess, and lay down control. Choose trust, choose presence, choose Jesus again and again. And if this conversation encouraged you, I encourage you to share it with someone who might be walking through their own season of chaos right now. Oftentimes, the holidays can be very tough for folks. So I invite you to go out to those that that might be struggling and let them know that God is with them and you are there for them. Let them be dependent on you. Keep living in the overflow of God's presence and power every day in your everyday lives. I'm Eli Austin. God bless you all. Have an incredible Christmas week. And just a quick reminder, there is no Wednesday Bible study this week, but there is the Christmas potluck on Christmas Day. I think doors will open around 12:30. We're going to have food and the kickoff for the games at 1. So come out and join us for the Christmas potluck and catch us on the next episode. But God bless you all and Merry Christmas.